lululu, mwanache nywangalira, lululu, lululu, mwanache.
Every second, 4 babies are born somewhere in the world. More than 130 million each year. For most parents, this is one of their moments of greatest happiness. But for some, it turns into a nightmare, which can haunt them for decades.
It was a sort of rush of emotion that my first baby had been delivered, but it was the worst moment of my life because I knew she wasn't alive.
30 years ago, Isabel Martin, who lives in Wales, was admitted to hospital after noticing reduced movement in her almost full-term baby. Despite close monitoring, her baby died before she could be born. Through a 16-hour labour, which she knew would end in a stillbirth, Isabel listened to the live babies next door.
The nurse said to me, "You're not as important as the lady in the room next door because her baby's alive and we need to get that baby out. Your baby isn't, so you can carry on pushing on your own." In fact, my husband had to go and fetch the oxygen because they were all busy with the lady next door.
Isabel cried for months. She had named the baby Holly and treasured the photos she had taken, the lock of hair she kept.
People tended to cross the road to avoid talking to me, and I saw them coming towards me and I knew they'd seen me and they crossed the road so they didn't have to talk to me. People were frightened of upsetting me, and a lot of my friends who were having babies at the same time, they were worried that I'd want their baby, and so they didn't want to talk to me either. So there was a lot of avoidance.
She found herself at odds with a society which did not credit her grief. Have another baby to get over it, she was told on leaving hospital. There was no follow-up to learn the lessons of Holly's death. She was not treated as the bereaved mother she felt herself to be.
It's never left me, even 30 years on. I still think about her every day. Having another baby doesn't make you get over it. I've had 6 more since, and it's not a replacement for the one that you've lost. Really, it's something that you get used to rather than get over. So it's not something that goes away.
New worldwide research, published in a series of articles in The Lancet, suggests not enough has changed since Holly's death. The articles, which pulled together the work of researchers in 43 different countries, show that improvement on reducing stillbirths has been very slow. Last year, 2.6 million women went through the same traumatic experience as Isabel, losing babies in the last 3 months of pregnancy. Most were preventable.
So one of the great myths about stillbirths is that they're inevitable. They're just meant to be, that they're all due to congenital abnormalities, that there is no medical solutions. And this series clearly shows from data and from evidence that that is a myth.
The research shows huge disparities. A woman in parts of sub-Saharan Africa or Pakistan has a 30 times greater risk of having a stillbirth than a woman in Iceland or Finland. 98% of all stillbirths occur in low and middle-income countries. For babies in Africa, labour is the most dangerous time, accounting for half of all deaths, almost all preventable.
Most shockingly, there are 1.3 million where the woman goes into labour with a live baby who's kicking, and that baby dies during the time she's in labour. This is something that's extremely rare in high-income countries, but in the highest risk countries it's 250 times more common.
Improving close-to-home clinics will make a huge difference. Infections during pregnancy like malaria and syphilis are the next most common cause of stillbirths. They can be treated or prevented at antenatal sessions, like this one in Malawi. In every region, there are some countries which have made much more progress than others. Researchers have ranked countries according to their risk of stillbirths and how much they have been able to reduce this. The Netherlands has made the most progress through careful auditing and better accountability to learn the lessons from each stillborn baby. In Africa, Rwanda has reduced stillbirths the most with a campaign to get women into health facilities in time to give birth. But this progress is not mirrored elsewhere.
Our analysis shows that it will be more than 160 years at current rate of progress before a baby born in Africa has the same chance of avoiding being a stillbirth as a baby in a high-income country today. This is unacceptable.
Christina, who lives in rural Malawi, lost a baby last year. She says when labour started, her husband was out drinking, so she couldn't make the journey to the health centre. The next day, the baby was dead. A year later, Christina is alone with her 5 other children and very sad.
My
friends are encouraging me to move on with life. They say that someday I will still go to where my child is and meet her. But I am being stigmatized by my own relatives. Because of the stillbirth, I have now divorced. My relatives are laughing at me, saying she wanted to have many children. Now look at her.
The stigma, isolation and sense of shame are a common thread that researchers have found across the world. 4.2 million women currently suffer from depression due to stillbirths, often in silence because their grief is not understood by those around them.
The day of your baby's birth should be the greatest moment of happiness, but for women who have a stillbirth, it's their greatest moment of tragedy. And this is worsened by the fact that grief is often disenfranchised. Society doesn't recognise that there's been a death, that people don't know how to talk to them, and that even decades later, the echoes of that tragedy are still being felt.
I did hear of one lady who was in her 70s and she had a stillborn baby when she was 25, and she's still crying over it even now and said she hadn't moved on. And other people I've spoken to haven't been able to go through it again and haven't had any more children.
Researchers say this failure to recognize the full impact of stillbirths is one of the reasons for lack of progress. Since 2000, infant and maternal mortality rates have been halved, so premature newborns like these babies have a much better chance of survival. In the same period, the number of stillbirths has hardly changed. If one of these babies dies, it is counted as a death in global statistics. Stillbirths, on the other hand, are not. In many countries, an infant death will automatically spark an investigation, whereas a stillbirth will not. Preventing a stillbirth has attracted far less resources.
Once the baby comes out, medicine society has paid a lot of attention to saying, what do we do for these babies, even if they're very preterm? How can we improve our medicine? How can we improve our technology? But in many ways, even in high-income countries, we haven't paid enough attention to that baby in utero. We can't see that the baby's in trouble. Sometimes we don't listen to the woman and her story about that. We haven't put enough innovation into what to do to address that.
Isabel's daughter, Holly, died because there were problems with the placenta, so she was insufficiently nourished. It is a problem which accounts for a significant proportion of stillbirths in high-income countries. Today, Isabel runs a charity to raise money for research. Studies are trying to find the best ways of identifying the women most at risk and knowing when it is beneficial to deliver the baby early. Isabel believes this should be possible. Based on her own experience, she says mothers can sometimes tell. During one of her pregnancies, Isabel started to notice the same signs as with Holly. The baby's movements slowed down. This time, she knew what to do.
When it started happening again, my sister and I went to the hospital, and we harassed this poor doctor until she said she'd deliver the baby. And I wasn't going to leave that room until she said she'd get the baby out. And she did get the baby out, and the baby was very small, and the placenta was just about to give up. So if I hadn't have known the possibility of stillbirth and would be prepared to go and make a fuss, I would have lost another baby. And she was delivered, and she was fine. As she came out, she was completely fine. A
lot has changed since Holly died. Bereavement counselling for parents, for instance, is now better. But much more needs to be done. For this to happen, researchers say, a stillbirth needs to be seen through the eyes of the parents who have experienced it, as the death of a child who should be mourned, and from whom lessons must be learned to help other unborn children.